Hey guys, this is Craig.
And this is Adrian.
And you are listening to Cash Talk.
You can find us on Instagram at The Adrian Hall, at Financial Fowler, at Cash Talk Podcast, and you can email us at cashtalkpodcast@gmail.com. And now for the stuff that we have to say in every episode so we don't get sued.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Registered representative securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative, Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge, Movement Mortgage, and Cash Talk are not affiliated.
Movement Mortgage supports equal housing opportunities. NMLS number 39179. Adrian Hall, NMLS number 1752332. NMLSconsumeraccess.org. All right, thanks. Here's the show.
Anybody that has ever basically decided they want to do something with their money eventually learns about a man by the name of Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey was not the first to talk about personal finance. I just kind of feel like he's the loudest to talk about it and probably debatably the most well-known. But you know, being in like your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever age you are, you have wisdom now. And you're at a point in your life where if you had known certain things when you were younger, you would have been a lot more better off. You'd be further ahead financially. Your goals would be hit. Like life would be different, but you didn't know it. So obviously you are where you are. One thing that I hear a lot of people mention is if they knew certain financial principles in high school, you know, why aren't they teaching these to the kids? If they were teaching the kids this, then everybody would be better. And I agree, but I had a unique experience that involves Dave Ramsey and high school and financial education. I went to a high school where there was an elective for personal finance. And actually it was called financial planning. And I took it. Don't even really know why, to be honest, because my love for finance came about 5 years after that point. But either way, I took the class and the class was Dave Ramsey centric. Like we got, I want to say one of his workbooks. I don't even know if it was like one of those proprietary ones that you get from all the big publishers that charge $1,000 a book. I think it was literally just from his company. But they go over all the teachings and all the philosophies and the ideas and the 7 baby steps that you can Google, which are like saving $1,000 for an emergency fund, paying off all your debt except for the house, saving 3 to 6 months of your expenses, investing 15% of your income, saving for college, paying off your house, building wealth and giving. I pulled all that off the internet. I'm not going to say that I had that memorized, but I was taught all of that at age 16. And I remember sitting in that class and I remember afterwards critiquing and joking with some of my friends of, this is all fun and games. Why am I saving for an emergency? I'm 16. I don't know what a financial emergency even feels like. I don't know what it's like to be in that spot of, holy crap, I have to figure my way out of this. Or paying off debt. Great. I can't legally sign a contract to even get into debt. So paying off debt, building a plan with the debt snowball, fun because I can't do this. So it was lost on me. And I'm not saying that I didn't pick up something along the way, but I can say from my own unique experience, learning it in high school, that particular method did nothing. But this episode generally, Craig and I, off record, we've talked a lot about our appreciation and wild distaste for the philosophies of this particular person. And I think that would be an amazing conversation to have today, to basically go through what you should implement, what you shouldn't implement, maybe some alternatives, and just give a hard look at the loudest voice in the room.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I mean, ultimately, I think we touch on things that we hear people, ask about as far as, well, I heard this piece of information from Dave Ramsey. I've been trying to follow this, this course that I've been doing and following all the steps, and that's great. I think that ultimately, the one thing I just want to preface our conversation with is that the teachings of Dave Ramsey aren't bad, and they are valid in a lot of cases. So I don't want to say that we disagree with everything. I want to say, ultimately, Dave Ramsey offers a great framework for, looking at your own goals and your own finances. But what I do like to point out is that it's not a blueprint for exactly how you should go about your financial planning, because it is a kind of a one size fits all outline. It's a cookie cutter approach to finance or personal finance, and that's great. But it is just an outline to give you some ideas, and I think that's where people have to make sure that they don't hold themselves to following the outline exactly the way it's spelled out, because ultimately it's just a very simple basis to start thinking about your finances on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like, the first thing I wanted to point out. But ultimately, I say we just start with the first baby step that says, save 1,000 for your starter emergency fund. For, in this scenario, I think anybody that's starting on a financial planning journey will benefit from doing that. I don't think there's any way that I can say that should not be a priority. If you have no cash savings, that is a great place to start. How about you? You think that's a pretty good one? Nothing to argue with there?
I think in the basic sense, it's not bad. In the basic sense, saving an emergency fund and emergency, because I had to like think it out in my head. Like Craig said $1,000, and I was like, well, that's not even my mortgage payment. I had to recognize, no, emergency is like flat tire, not job loss. That's not the scale we're on just yet.
Right.
I think it's a good starting point, but I also think it's worth evaluating the needs of your household before you set that number. Because when I was starting off, it was just me and Jay. And when we decided to build our emergency fund, it was just two adults, two dudes, no kids, like not a big deal. But if you have children, you might find that $1,000 isn't going to get you very far if something was to come up.
Right. And so that's exactly where I was going to go with this. And that is, you got to start somewhere. So that's where I think baby step number one of save 1,000 for your starter emergency fund. That's great. So you got to start somewhere. Right. But where I will say that I start differing from Dave Ramsey's baby step teachings is immediately here. And that is baby step number two, which is pay off all debt using the debt snowball. I, like you said, would not stop after saving $1,000 and just say, yep, I'm good on the emergency fund. I'm going to now put all of my excess cash flow into paying off my debts. I would not take a black and white approach to it that way. I would, after getting up to maybe $1,000 in the emergency fund, now start allocating half of what you were putting into that savings into your debt payoff, but continue to put some into that savings as well. Because just because you have 1,000 in savings doesn't mean, okay, now I'm taken care of and I can put all my excess cash flow to debt payoff now. So that's where I would say baby step two and baby step three, which is save 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund, should be done simultaneously without sacrificing cash flow that allows you to be comfortable and live your life, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. So real life story, because I went through like all of this. I was the ideal Dave Ramsey candidate of, holy crap, I'm in this bad situation. How do I get out? I did exactly what you said, Craig, though, because I looked at it from that lens, because it took one incident for me to look back and say, uh-oh, I see what's happening here. I saved up my $1,000 and then I started throwing all my money towards debt. And I don't remember what happened, but something came up and I blew through that emergency fund and put the rest on my credit card because I didn't have enough. And so here I am focusing on paying off debt. And I was immediately taking steps backwards because I was underprepared. And I'd recognize, if I'd put an additional $50, a paycheck, a month, whatever it was, into that emergency fund while I was paying off debt, I could have simultaneously done the two. And I could have, more than likely, I think doing my math, I'd like figured out I could basically have absorbed the whole emergency versus putting it back on a high interest credit card and taking that step backwards. And that's where like I feel the deviation starts to happen. Is like the 7 baby steps, so to speak, are real very black and white. They're real like this is the one size fits all approach, but it doesn't give you a stepping stone, so to speak. Like one important thing that I feel, and I'm going to go left field and I'll come right back. Trust me, buckle up, is if you read his story, he talks about how he was a millionaire that lost it all, that became a millionaire again. And somehow that's supposed to inspire you when he never once mentions what he did to become a millionaire either time, other than what we can see is sell you ideas. But he sells you ideas by shaming you into doing it. You've made these mistakes. You suck as a person. If you do these things, then you will get ahead and maybe one day you could be like me. And I feel like that's what the product actually is. But I disagree with step number 2, paying off all your debt, for one key item, because it doesn't make you evaluate why you were in it to begin with. And if you don't know how you got there, you're more inclined to fall back into it. Like the pain of getting out is half the game, but recognizing those little, small, tiny decisions that put you in it to begin with is the other half. Just like when you hear about wanting to cut back on your budget and everybody says, well, just don't go out to lunch and just bring coffee from home and things like that. They're alluding to that life of it only takes $5 at a time. You're not always going out and spending $42,000 in a sitting. It's $5 here, $20 there, $40 here, $10 here that puts you in that situation. And I don't think that any of the baby steps even addresses that problem.
That's huge. I hadn't even thought about that, but that is exactly right. I think you just highlighted the need to add a step before number 1, and that is look at cash flow and put some attention into budgeting. Because if you're in a position where you don't have any savings, you have some debt, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, it is time to reevaluate spending and income and figure out where those inefficiencies are. So to even get to a place where you can start saving to get to that $1,000 starter emergency fund, you got to take a step before that, and that is budgeting. So, yeah, you're exactly right. That's something that we have to add in there. And budgeting is not just sitting there and looking, okay, what's coming in, what's coming out. When I say you got to put some attention into budgeting, and that is, how do I have to change my budget to allow for saving and debt payoff and everything else that you want to keep in mind. And, as we all know, in real life, all of these things kind of happen at the same time. You're trying to spin a bunch of different plates, all at once, and you're trying to pay attention to, covering your risks and everything else. So it's not necessarily a, complete step 1, then complete step 2, then complete step 3. They all kind of happen together. And I think that's also lost in this approach a little bit. Mm-hmm. For example, baby step number 4 says, invest 15% of your household income into retirement. And now I know, because this is the way I am, if I weren't a finance guy, I would go about this by, completing 1, then completing 2, then completing 3. And I think that starting to invest for the future, your retirement, is something that you have to do all along the way. But you don't have to start at 15%. If that makes sense. A lot of folks will have some sort of employer-sponsored retirement plan. And, I think even if you don't have $1,000 starter emergency fund, even if you haven't paid all your debt off in the debt snowball, and even if you aren't quite to the 3 to 6 months of emergency funds, obviously, you want to be putting something into your retirement for the future, just because you don't want to sacrifice the growth that you will get and interest credited to your accounts by being exposed to the market. And so one thing that I always tell people is that, hey, start real low. I mean, if you are having to dedicate a lot of your cash flow to paying off debt and building up some emergency savings, that doesn't mean you shouldn't save for retirement at all. Start with 1 or 2% of your income, defer just a tiny bit, get a little bit of your employer's match if it's available, in the retirement plan. And then as you continue to build up momentum and get ahead on your emergency savings and pay off debt, you can start to increase your deferral into your retirement savings. That way, it's not a black and white, I have to do this before I start on my retirement savings. You can kind of get started and ramp up as you go along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I have a comment to the baby step number 3 and number 4, the 3 to 6 months of expenses and the 15% in retirement. I first say, and I tell anybody, I'm not like a financial anybody. I'm a licensed loan officer. I've been doing this a while, like for my own money, but I'm not like a financial advisor, financial planner. I don't have any of those accreditations. But when people do come to me, I try my best to hold them to a higher level. Like, I'm going to challenge you to think. I'm going to challenge you to grow. This is more than just complete these steps and then, yay, life's great. It's complete these steps and learn along the way so that you know why you're doing it and how your family is going to be better because of it. Like a comment on number 3 and a comment on number 4. Number 3, save 3 to 6 months of emergency expenses. I find vague. What is 3 to 6? Like, as somebody that went through it, am I saving 3? Am I saving 4, 5, or 6? What am I doing? It took me, somebody that like went 100% all in, to learn about how to make myself better and deviate outside of these steps when I wasn't being taught anything outside of these steps. It took me like a year and a half to figure out what a month of emergency expenses were, like what that physical number was, because everybody just said, oh, save 3 months. Like, how do I find that number for me? That was tricky until I sat down and recognized what I'm doing is like, not even just looking at your budget and multiplying it by the amount of months. Like, if you lost your job, you're not going to have an eating out budget. You're not going to have a new clothes budget. Those will probably go away. So that's not really part of your emergency fund if you want. But like your mortgage, your car payment, if that's still around at this point, utilities, groceries, those are emergencies. And I think the 3 to 6 month window really can sometimes is more than enough. Sometimes is too much. Sometimes is too little. It depends on a very good reality check I had of how long do you think it will take to find a job that has a similar income if you were to lose yours. In like my husband's world, he works in IT. He could pick up another job pulling the same income probably in 60 days. So 3 months is enough. Me, I could probably get another job 60, 90 days. If I have to reproduce my income, it might be 6 months, 9 months. So 3 months to 6 months is not enough. And that's a view that I feel isn't elaborated on. So you could build yourself, benchmark this number, hit this number, and not recognize you're too short until it's time to put that to the test. And then it's too late to build. Number 4, investing 15% of your income. I'm not going to knock the 15%. What I am going to have a comment on is like the teachings follow very heavily stock investments, and they don't take into consideration any type of bonds, any other type of investments that exist. It's just stocks, and everything always assumes you're going to get 12% returns for some reason, or like some consistently high number. And I think if you're playing the game in the long run, you're selling yourself short to assume you're going to get maximum numbers. You should always kind of err on the side of caution and say, well, maybe 6%, 7%. If you get more, you end up ahead. The other thing on that is compounding. The sooner you start, the faster it builds. So It took me 3.5 years to pay off my debt. If I had not put almost any money in my 401k for 3.5 years, that's 40 to 50 months of time. That is, well, I guess 50 months is 4. Either way, it's months and months and months of time. And half the game is just waiting on your investment to grow interest upon itself. Like, I recently hit a pretty high milestone in my 401k, and I exceed a lot of people, not because I threw a lot of money into it, but because I started at age 23. And when I was paying off my debt, I made sure to prioritize keeping money going into my 401k because I didn't want to take away from that. Because the one thing I had learned by that point is I don't need to put, 60% of my paycheck in here, but I do need to keep some amount of energy on it because the biggest thing I have to build actual wealth is the fact that I started at 23, 24, 25, and I didn't wait until I had this epiphany at 25 to start paying off debt and then wait till I was 28 to 29 to actually have it paid off to start putting the energy onto my 401k and my retirement assets.
Right. Yeah. No. So the compounding is huge, and that's why it makes sense just to start with a little bit if you can, because eventually that does start to compound, um, and that gets you way further ahead than you may realize. One of the best experiences I have in my job, and it happens a lot actually, is when I go to meet with 401k plan participants. That's something that I do that's unique in the business that I'm in. I do go, I travel to my employer's place of business, and I meet with employees and I help them look at their retirement savings goals and their financial planning issues. And, I offer that as just a benefit for them working for the employer that they work for. One of the best things I get to do with people is sit down and look, after a year of putting just 3% of income into your 401k, you've saved X amount of dollars. And every time, I mean every time, it's always a pleasant surprise. They're always like, wow, this gives me confidence. I can't believe that I've have this much in my account. I think I even want to continue putting a little bit more. I would like to increase my deferral, and that type of positive information is affirming. And when you just start with just a little tiny bit into your account, and you see the benefit of compound interest and compound growth, it makes you buy into the situation a little bit. So maybe if you don't have a lot of conviction for it at the beginning, start somewhere, start small, and just see for yourself. And I think that's great. A really great piece of advice there.
I can give you real quick an example because I don't like to just throw ideas out. I like to give like actual, this is what it looks like. I put up my Instagram, like you can follow it. It's out there. I'm not making this up. When I say compound interest, keep in mind the most you can legally contribute. Well, I'm not going to say the most. In my situation, the most I can legally contribute to my 401k is $19,500. There's some tiers that Craig can probably speak on better than I can off the top of my head. But that's the most you can contribute in a 12-month calendar period, like tax year to tax year. Looking on my Instagram, August 4th, 2020, I posted and said that I had $60,064.64 in there. So August 4th, $60,000 was in there. Keeping in mind, you can only contribute no more than 19.5, so less than 20,000. On May 8th, 2021, which is not 1 year ahead, I had $101,000 in my 401k. And I will tell you, I've not hit 20,000 in contributions. I didn't by August 4th, or for that year I had, but from August 4th to now, I've not done it. But yet and still, between the contributions I have made, between my employer-sponsored contributions, because I held up my side of the bargain, they matched it, and between the growth of the assets I already had in there, it went up $41,000. That is compound interest. The earlier you get started, the more time you have for that to happen. And neglecting to prioritize saving until a later point in your financial journey robs you of that crucial time.
Right, exactly. And I will also speak to what you said on number 3, save 3 to 6 months of expenses. And this will be short. I just want to say, I agree. You have to look at it through a lens of what is my personal situation? What industry am I in? How quickly can I replace my income if something were to happen, like losing my job? I encourage folks to, instead of thinking about saving 3 to 6 months of expenses or however many months, think about saving 3 to 6 months of income. Because
smart one.
Yeah, when let's just say the big emergency, let's say you lose your job, you lose your income. If it's going to take you a few months to get that back, you don't want to have to immediately change your financial lifestyle. And if you've have an emergency fund that has, so many months of income saved, you know that you can continue living and support your lifestyle uh, and allow you to put a lot of energy into replacing your income instead of putting that energy into cutting expenses and changing your lifestyle to scrape by, if that makes sense. I just think that when you aren't necessarily stressed about paying the bills, you can put more of your energy towards replacing your income. And that way, if you think about it as savings in terms of income instead of expenses, you can continue to live the way that you have been accustomed to. And I think that just helps you be more efficient in your working life. And that's something that, you might not think about when you first read that, but that's how I like to tweak it a little bit and say, don't think about it in expenses, think about it in income. So you can continue to uh, live the life that you've become accustomed to. Because let's just be honest, it's uncomfortable to cut expenses. It's uncomfortable to, have something, change in your life, and then all of a sudden have all of your plans and everything else upended. Hopefully you can continue with your plans and just pivot a little bit and get back on track after you've replaced your income, build that emergency fund back up.
I'll give you a real life comment to that, actually. 60-second story or less. When I lost my job in 2018, and it was a very sudden job loss, walked in, boom, gone, job was gone. No idea it was about to happen. And I called Jay standing outside 5 minutes later and was like, hey, I just lost my job. So yeah, okay, bye. It took me a couple months to get back on my feet financially, to find somewhere to go, and then to start producing a noticeable income. So in my world, I knew things were going to change. We were on the ramen noodle budget. Like there was no more doing this, no more doing that. I remember my mind recognizing that because I was at home every day. It was blatantly obvious my life was interrupted. Jay's was not. He got a really bad phone call, and then he told his boss, and then he continued working, and then he came home, and it was a Friday. So we had Friday activities. Friends were going to come over for drinks. So we already did that. And then we hung around the house Saturday and Sunday. And then Monday he woke up and went back to work through Friday, Monday through Friday, over and over and over. And he was still producing an income, and his life was not interrupted. So it took him a couple conversations with me to be like, yo, we can't do like we used to do, because I know, but also you don't know like I know, because you're not the one that is staring this in the face. So it's kind of easy to forget that the budget looks a little bit different when your life didn't truly change. So sometimes that income piece is exactly that like other people in your household, your significant other, your children, it's going to take them a little bit longer to adapt to the fact that right now you're on a different type of budget. Doesn't mean this is where you're going to be forever, but this is where you are right now.
Right. Yeah, good points. Moving on past step 4, step 5. So this is where I really will pump the brakes. Baby step 5 says save for your children's college fund. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that you go from starting to save for retirement straight into saving for your kids' college. I think, first of all, you have to think about, is this something that is important to me that I want to provide first? Do you want to pay for your kids' college? Answer that question. If the answer is yes, you still have some work to do before realizing or deciding, hey, this is something that is feasible and makes sense right now to put money towards this. So I encourage people all the time to put their future savings and retirement savings above. Obviously, Dave has done this in the baby steps as well. Make it a higher priority than paying for college. I have people push back on that a lot, but I'm about to walk you through my thinking here. You want to make sure that you are on track with your retirement savings. And when I mean on track, I mean that not only are you saving a certain percent of your income for retirement, you have to look at how much you've saved, how long you've been doing it, how long you have until retirement, what your confidence of income growth is, and really understand what your future expenses may be in retirement. You got to look at healthcare expenses, things like that, which are going to be super, super expensive. Inflation is a thing, and by the time we're retiring, home healthcare, things like that are going to be outrageously expensive. But you got to really take some time to put effort into understanding, am I on track for retirement, before deciding to allocate some of your cash flow to paying for your children's college. Why? Well, if you decide to sacrifice your retirement savings in order to save for your children's college and make sure that they don't have to get any debt to pay for their education, you may find yourself in a position where at the end of your life in later years, you are relying on your kids at that point to help you pay for home health care, nursing homes, just retirement expenses in general. And that is going to be more of a burden than your child just paying for their own college.
That's a good one. Like financial burden, spiritual burden, physical burden. That's a huge tax you're placing on your kids.
Exactly. If it comes down to choosing, am I going to help my kids by taking care of myself or help my kids by taking care of them? If you have to choose one, you got to help your kids by taking care of yourself, because you do not want that to be a burden for them. Late stage issues for folks in retirement become very expensive, whether they're health related, or what have you. But that is a burden. And I mean, being a caregiver, I don't know if you've ever done that. It's really, really difficult. It's a huge strain on a relationship. And you want to be able to have yourself be taken care of in later years so that you can enjoy a relationship with your kids and they aren't burdened with taking care of you. And I think that is something that's lost on a lot of folks. You don't need to be contributing to a 529 account for your kids' college savings if you have not gotten ahead on saving for your retirement. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I understand that.
One thing that my father did, which I thought was actually smart, was my sister was of the children. He recognized that she was the one that was going to be college bound. And he said, okay, let's do this. You get student loans. And as long as you attend school and you get good grades, I'll pay them off for you. But if you don't take the responsibility of your own education seriously and you think this is a free ride, then you pay them off. And I know like those little lessons is what my childhood was all about. And it taught me to stand incredibly independent because I knew I couldn't rely on my parents to always save my ass. Sometimes I had to be the person that was judge, jury, and executioner of my own life. And that's one of those things where like, I don't know if he saved or not, but he had a plan in place of, if I'm going to sacrifice my life to help you, you have to make sure to do something with it. But to build into what you just mentioned of like taking care of your kids, real life thing. I may have said the story on this podcast before. I'm going to share it real quick. My father passed away in 2019. He was 61 years old. It was sudden, like 100% sudden. Nobody saw it coming. Boom. That was the end. Had a stroke, the end. And when we were in the hospital, I was sitting there next to my mother, families coming through, friends coming through. Oh, he was a great man. All the pleasantries. Like I'm not going to describe exactly where I was. I was sitting against the window watching like the cars drive by outside. And I was thinking his military pension's about to stop. I just told his boss that, he's dying tomorrow. So his income's about to stop. My mom doesn't have anything. She worked at the time at Target. So let's like be real. She ain't pulling six figures. And the breadwinner is gone, which means this house that they've lived in for 17 years that was sustained off of his life, she can't pay for it. The life, like just day-to-day expenses, she can't pay for. The car payment, she can't pay for. The credit cards that he was, using and paying off monthly, she can't pay for. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to do something about this. And I remember making financial moves. I remember talking to my husband about, here's what we're going to have to do because of the children, we're going to be the ones that are going to have to pick up this slack. We're going to be the ones that's going to have to make sure my mom's taken care of from here on out. And for reference, my mom is still not 60 years old. So I was thinking very far forward. When he passed away, that was the mentality I had of, all right, here we go. We're going to have to do this because I know there wasn't enough. Like it wasn't, we weren't ready. Nobody was ready. The saving grace in that entire situation was life insurance. The fact that he had life insurance, it covered all of her expenses. It covered everything he left behind. It replaced his income. It put her back in this financial situation to where I didn't have to be burdened. The other kids didn't have to be burdened. And that is kind of like a different but real life situation. If you are making sure that you're lifting your children up, which you should do as a parent, but it's to the detriment of yourself and you're falling because they're so high in the sky, eventually that metaphorical scale will shift. And those years when it is going to be the hardest on them, now they're out of college, they're starting families, children, house buying, career building, you're aging, you're retiring, or maybe you can't retire. But now the cost of your life is blowing up because of healthcare expenses, like you mentioned. If there's no plan in place for that because you've neglected to, dedicate time and resources towards it, you are going to burden your children. And I can't speak on what that feels like. I have no kids, but as a child, that was one of the heaviest weights I've ever felt was, holy crap, this is the next 40 years of my life. And I have no other choice but to stare it head on in the face. Everything I thought I was going to do out the window. And it was because of that planning. It was because of the fact he signed a few policies that I did not have to be in that situation. And my life could thrive because of it.
Right. So that's, that brings another really, really huge point to the table, and that is life insurance. Okay. So let's just talk about that for a second. First of all, I would just like to say, let's replace number 5, baby step 5 with save for your child's college fund with formulate a long-term care plan. And we'll talk about that in a second. But before that, I think you brought up something that we have completely skipped over, and that is, life insurance is important. And this is the way I think about life insurance. I don't think that it fits in between any one of these steps cleanly. I think that it really totally depends on your personal situation. So, do you need life insurance? Ask yourself these 4 questions. Do I own a home? Am I married? Do I have kids? Do I own a business? Those 4 questions. If you have any of those 3, if any of those 3 apply to you, or if you have really just 2 of those, it's important to think about life insurance and legal documents. But if you have 3 of those, it's really time to think about legal documents and life insurance, because there's a lot of liability there, and you want to make sure that your people are taken care of if something happens to you. And that's really, really important. It's a risk that you have to pay attention to. So I don't think that falls into any one of those, any one of these steps cleanly, but I do think you just have to think about that as you move through your financial life and as you build your financial foundation. You have to keep those things in mind. Do I own a business? Do I own a home? Am I married? Do I have kids? If 3 of those apply to you, you definitely need to get legal documents and look at some life insurance. If 2 of those apply to you, it's probably it's time to start thinking about it. Now, what's the amount of life insurance that you need to apply for? That kind of also depends on what your level of income is, what your net worth is. That is something that you have to look at inwardly, look at your own situation. But the principle is, protect those that you have, protect your people, I guess is what I'll say. Now, life insurance a lot of times can be purchased through an employer-sponsored plan. So you can get an employer group life plan, life policy. A lot of times that's a great place to start, but usually they're not large death benefit amounts. So it really makes a lot of sense when you're thinking about the life insurance and legal documents and all of that, to look at getting your own life insurance coverage that's not tied to your employer with a death benefit amount that is not based on what you can get through a group plan, but based on what your needs are as a family. And that a lot of times you can think about debt payoff and replacing income, things like that. Exactly like Adrian said with his father's situation. Um, Really, really important, and I think that's something that's not on this list at all, and it doesn't really cleanly fit in anywhere, but it's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. So number 6, pay off your house. I got
Yeah.
opinions on this one. I'm gonna keep it brief because we're getting long, but
Yeah.
ride with me. So I think paying off your house is a fantastic goal. I think it's something you should strive towards. Ultimately, you don't want to be in like any amount of debt forever, especially the roof over your head. I don't think that's wise. But I also think you should evaluate your whole financial situation. This might be where a conversation with a professional comes into play, somebody that actually has sat down with your goals, like all of them, and said, okay, here's what you should do. A prime example, we're rooting back to something I mentioned a few baby steps earlier of how you're always supposed to get like 12% in the market. And I was like, I don't know, do something more conservative, plan for 7 or 8. Do you know when the last time somebody got a 7 or 8% mortgage was? It was a long time ago. My present mortgage of the house I'm sitting in at this very second is 2.562%. That means that every year I'm paying 2.5% to borrow the money for my house. And I could either allocate the $300,000+ I owe or whatever the amount is to pay off that 2.5% rate, or I could take that same amount of money, keep the mortgage, make my payments, but take that money and put it into different investment vehicles, even conservative ones that aren't going to hit all kinds of huge market swings all the time, and earn double, triple, or quadruple what I'm paying to borrow the money. I think as you get close to retirement, having your house paid off is incredibly more necessary. It becomes a substantially more important goal to hit. But at my age, I'm 30 and like 2 months and some change. I have some income earning years ahead of me. Right now, my goal is to build wealth all around me. And then maybe it may shift to let's pay off this house before I retire. Maybe I can hit all my goals and say, let's just do this one too. For me, paying off the house isn't the goal. But I know some people similar age where that's all they're putting their energy onto. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's one of those personal finances, personal things. And you have to determine what's the best use of your own money on that one. What do you think?
Right. I think you really hit that really well. I will just say that, if we're in an environment like we are now with low interest rates, it makes more sense to hold on to your mortgage and just pay that low percentage of interest, I think. And really, a lot of the times it does not necessarily make sense to pay off your home early right now. But like, how people that lived through the Great Depression, even after the Great Depression, were always penny pinchers and super, like, really, really resourceful, and that never left
And
their
they
personal.
hoarded 50 cans of everything in their basements. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's really interesting with millennials specifically. We remember 2008, 2009, and it's just something that makes us feel very uncomfortable. We saw our parents struggle through that. It's just a really bad recession that we lived through in formative years. And I think there are folks that are just have this risk mindset that they just have to have their house paid for. And you know what? I totally get that. And I think that financial planning has to take into account your own personal feelings about money. And that if you are the type of person that just has, it's ingrained, it's in your DNA that if your house is not paid off, you're going to be anxious about it. And it's going to, like, go against your quality of life, then okay, I would not say don't pay off your house early, you know what I mean? But I would encourage people to think about the fact that, hey, your interest rate's low, you can put that extra cash flow into a more efficient vehicle. Instead of paying off your mortgage early, you can get some more retirement savings going. And that's usually what I'll recommend to people. But hey, if it's just one of those risk mindsets that is just, it's really, really important for you, then that's okay, and I get it. Um, but I will say, even if for people that are closer to retirement, if they're still paying on their mortgage, but they still haven't quite hit their retirement savings goals, I still at that point would not sacrifice retirement savings to make extra payments on the mortgage. I would just continue making the payments and invest in your retirement savings so that you are earning more interest than you're paying. And as long as you're doing that, you're okay. But as interest rate environments change, which they always do, it's a fluid thing. That may change, but right now, I think that's kind of a good summary for it. Moving on to baby step 7 is build wealth and give. I don't necessarily have a problem with baby step number 7. I think that if you're working through all of these steps, you're working on building wealth. You're building a wealth mindset. And that's something that you should always be working on. So I don't think it's necessarily something that is put off until step 7. But I think give is also valid. I think that folks that are advocates for others in life ultimately do very well because their priorities are set in a frameable manner. And I think that that's something that's it's a great aspiration to have, is to give back and to advocate for others. So really have no issue with that one, except for building wealth is something that you should already be doing. And even when you're starting with baby step number 1, saving $1,000 in your starter emergency fund, that's the start of your journey to building wealth. So don't feel like you're not building wealth before you get to the end of the step 7, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like number 7's out of order. I agree. It's a good thing. Like, no knocks. I think it should really be more like number 4 in the order, because once, like, your emergency fund technically is a source of wealth. Don't ever view it like that, because it's your bailout plan, but it's a fluency. Like, let's be real. If you save $15,000, would you not feel a little better? That's wealth. That's good. Investing in your 401k is wealth. Saving for your child's plan is wealth. Having equity in your house is wealth. And if you're waiting till number 7 to view these things as wealth, you're shortchanging yourself. I feel like wealth also leans into other types of investments like stock markets, mutual funds, ETFs, real estate, bonds, all these different things that you could start playing around with once you've got your financial umbrella intact of having your debt paid off, having your emergency fund put together. And like you mentioned with giving, I feel like as long as you're not taking away from yourself, if you've reached this place of abundance because you've done those things I mentioned a second ago, you can give at an earlier stage. I mean, never give more than you can, go without. But if you live in a place of abundance, if you look for others, you care for others, more tends to come to you because, like you mentioned, you have things framed properly in your life. So I don't have an issue with it. I think it's just putting a lens on something that you've already been doing probably years ahead of time. Because if you paid off your house, you're probably 6 or 7 or 10 or 15 years into your journey at this point. And the reality is that now you're addressing something that you could have done last decade.
Right. That's exactly right. I think it should be looked at as a mindset, building wealth. And yeah, I don't think anybody should ever take attention away from or not have the goal of giving back in some way, whether it's with your time or financially. I think that it's really something that will benefit you in the long run. So yeah, anything else that we need to touch on, or is that a good coverage of that topic?
Yeah. You mentioned giving back with your time. That's another key. You don't have to always write a check. You can volunteer, just putting that out there. But yeah, I think that's my overall critiques. I can talk more about the person and the company and all of that stuff, but there's probably a fine line between evaluating and slandering. So we'll go ahead and put a pin in it here. More of the story, there's lots of resources. There's lots of people, like you're listening to one right now. There's lots of different avenues, lots of different conversations. Personal finance is personal. Pick out pieces that you like from everybody's approach and custom tailor to your own. You don't have to follow one person's journey, because if it doesn't line up how you thought it will, you're going to get discouraged and you're going to stop, and that defeats the whole purpose.
Right. Well said. I have nothing to add.